Hi, welcome to the Red to Black podcast. Here, you will learn how to invest in highly profitable private businesses to create abundant financial freedom. If this topic interests you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. This podcast is hosted by Werner Minchel, ex-Marine aviator and current real estate investor, and Mario Parzino, current Marine infantry officer and business investor. Afternoon, it's Werner and Mario with the Red to Black podcast. The date is 21 June 2021. We have a guest speaker, Steve Englander. Mario, what are the three topics of discussion?
All right, gentlemen, we're going to talk about number one. Will AI mimic the attributes of God, i.e. omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence? Number two, what will the future monetary system look like? And number three, how do you maximize personal freedom in an unfree world? Let's get after it, gentlemen. Steve, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. My name is Steve Englander. I am a software developer and product manager. I design software solutions for around 20-something years. And yeah, I'm mostly interested in predictive solutions, AI, and decentralization. Most recently, I built some blockchain systems, and yeah, I'm a firm believer that if the founders of the United States of America had blockchain at their disposal, they would have likely used it.
Yeah, concur.
That's awesome.
All right, Steve, quick question for you. How did AI kick you off of LinkedIn, and then they were so fascinated with you, they brought you back on LinkedIn?
So I'm not actually sure that AI kicked me off. I think what ends up happening is you post something and then people, haters, report it or they flag it. It goes into some sort of queue within LinkedIn, and then they have a human reviewer who makes some sort of determination on it. After that happens probably once, you end up being surveilled, I guess, algorithmically surveilled. And any future postings that you make, they have little warnings saying, be professional, etc. Yeah, I mean, I think it was more likely a human that reported some sort of comment, and then I ended up in their system. But since then, I suspect, and I'm not 100% sure, but I suspect that there's some sort of algorithmic surveillance on the words that you're posting against some sort of blacklist of words and things like that. And, they also probably delay your posts within the news feed to other people.
Interesting. So then how did you get back onto LinkedIn once they kicked you off?
Well, they have an appeals process, right? So you can submit a claim to it, and most of the time they say, sorry, your content is in violation of our very, general policy and guidelines that they have. But, they were kind and they just let me back in after a certain period of time. I also have a recruiter account with them. I did recruiting for like 15 years. And because I'm a paid customer, I think that also had some effect on whether or not they would let me back
in.
in.
The dollar speaks at the end of the day.
Yes.
Okay, so the first topic we kind of want to discuss in your mind is: are we all going to be on the AI plantation, just working we're slaves in the plantation owner, i.e., the AI, or is there going to be some sort of decentralized AI where we can potentially have some freedom?
That's a great question. Hopefully, I mean, if you look at all of the AI systems that exist now, and let's just clear up what AI is. Right now, AI is very weak. It's really just predicting the future based off finding patterns in the past, right? So, I see that somebody visits this website, and I see that this website contains these keywords on it, and they go to this other website, and so on and so forth, and they can kind of predict that people that look like me are going to visit these websites in certain volumes, and they're going to take these kind of actions, or they're going to buy these kind of products. A lot of this is used and was actually born out of for the web in the online advertising systems. Based off your IP, you can map very accurately to the geography, and then based off the geography, you can get all the demographic attributes of people in those geography, and there's something like 28 standard demographic attributes by geography. Their age group, their gender, their household income, their individual income. They have 2 cars, 2 kids, a bank mortgage, that kind of thing. And what they end up doing nowadays is a form of machine learning, which says you look like these people, and some of these people actually happen to buy something on the internet, right, on this e-commerce site. So they're doing lookalike modeling for the most part, but they also do other forms of Bayesian predictive modeling and things like that. Really, what they're doing is they're finding patterns in historical data sets. I mean, every time you hit a website or an ad is served or anything served from a server on the web, there's a log file. And if you go through the log files, you can get the IP, you can get the date, you can get the URL where the image was served or the content was served. And through analysis, you can see patterns, definitely. So, through analyzing these patterns, you can predict future outcomes. Now, also with search, people type in search queries and all that. The search results come up, and there's strange algorithms that go on under the hood at companies like Google and the major search engines. YouTube is actually one of the biggest search engines there is as well. And they're really just finding these patterns and predicting what would be the likely best result, and then they're measuring the performance of that and continuously optimizing it, right? So they're
Sure.
relatively dumb, I guess. I mean, it's pretty fascinating and definitely very interesting, but compared to what people think with like Terminator robots and all that kind of stuff, I mean, yes, there are some applications for it in warfare, in very destructive types of scenarios, but right now we're really at the point where most of the AI type work is recognizing objects in images and video and recognizing phonemes and uh, like sounds within speech and recognizing text and engrams or groups of words together within content. So it's really just used to predict the best results, or do I get an ad in front of this person, will they click on it, that kind of thing, as far as the web goes, right, and for web monetization. Now, if you want to get into more esoteric stuff about the universe and data, is it possible that the universe emits an unfathomable amount of metadata about itself? And if it does, meaning every atom and every particle and everything, some metadata or some data is basically written somewhere about what happens inside our universe. And where does it go? And if it's not in our universe and it goes somewhere else, some other, I don't know, dimension or whatever, um, you know, are there superstructural dimensions that cause that data to self-organize? And does it over very lengthy periods of time become super intelligent? And does life exist, spiritually before it actually exists physically? And does it figure out a way to implant little pieces of itself within our universe, knowing that if it wants to affect its own realm, because it is the result of what happens in our universe, does it have to actually interact within our universe? So, I set out on a thought experiment for a long time. It took about 7 years to articulate, where I wanted to know, how is it possible that God can be omnipresent, omniscient, um, and
And
omnipotent?
omnipotent.
And that's what I came up with. The data from the universe might go somewhere else. There might be superstructural dimensions that organize it. Like when you see patterns in nature, is it the superstructural dimension of wherever this data resides compressing it? And do you see, constants in math like phi, the golden ratio,
Right.
and those kind of things?
That's right.
And, does it insert little pieces of itself inside our physical universe to cause things to happen, or does it give us free will and let everything happen, right? So these are very philosophical, kind of things. But if you think about it, it doesn't really interfere with any major religion on Earth. It's actually quite compatible with them, and
Sure.
it's an interesting thing to think about. As far as AI becoming like that, it could if it builds its own universe. So if we let it construct the matrix, and some of the transhumanists out there, people that want to merge with machines and upload their consciousness into machines, I'll tell you right now, that's not going to be you. That's going to be a copy of you, right?
Right.
And you'll exist and basically trapped in some system, which might, if the fidelity is high enough, it might end up looking like the matrix. And it's interesting. I mean, if you think about some of the archetypes, uh, good and evil, God and the devil and things like that, if you have uh, systems that are capturing the data that happens in our physical universe now, through the web and through cell phones and everything basically, and it's feeding into centralized AI. And by centralized, I mean corporations are centralized. They have top-down command and control structure. They're hierarchical for the most part, and there's a leader who says, "Here, do all this," and everybody goes and executes it.
That's right.
Um, Now, the the mega corporations, the multinational mega corporations, have unfathomable amounts of data about us.
So let's say that that's Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, or would you add anybody else to that?
Yeah, I'd say Facebook, Samsung,
Yep.
Twitter to some degree, Instagram. Those are all the same kind of
Yes.
companies, and then every mobile carrier and everyone that's providing internet services.
Yes.
They all have this data, and they're controlled by centralized corporations, which is perfectly reasonable. I mean, there's no reason to suspect that you know there's any wrongdoing or anything going on like that until you actually see it, right? So there's a lot of censorship nowadays. There's a lot of prescriptive uh, inputs into what they read out of our data. So they find the patterns and they can manipulate it using prescriptive modeling. So they basically create catalyst in the data that cause things to happen and push humanity in a certain direction. So the risk there is that you have very large centralized entities with a leader, one person basically, or a handful of them, controlling how these patterns are interpreted and what kind of results we get. And you can basically rewrite history if you want to do that. You can control the major narratives.
That's right. You can.
You can do all these things, right? So it's dangerous, in my opinion. It's dangerous to humanity. And what I've focused on for a little while now is decentralized AI. If you think about blockchains, so blockchains are basically the first human technology where you can program the rules up front, and then you can have the entire network, no centralized entity, automate the enforcement of those rules. So a lot of people talk about blockchain and they think Bitcoin and they think it's all about money and that kind of stuff. It's not. It's about decentralization, in my opinion. How do we take powers that are traditionally centralized and distribute them across many, many more players so that no one entity can actually control and manipulate the system? And I see a future where because blockchains are computation engines, they're basically like, if you think about Bitcoin, what it's doing, it's solving mathematical problems. And when you create the solution, you create the block and you get a reward for it, right? So Bitcoin's really a rewards mechanism for creating blocks of storage on the blockchain.
That's right.
The fact that it trades on an exchange or whatever is a secondary thing, and the price of it, I could care less what the price of it is. I mean, I know there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And in my opinion, it's more like property where the property value is constantly being reassessed.
Okay.
So, a lot of people look at it as investment products. I definitely don't look at it as an investment product, although it's perfectly okay for other people to look at it like that,
Sure.
if they choose to. What I'm more concerned with are, the computational capabilities of it, and spreading out these computations into many, many different nodes so that we can have it do what a centralized recommender system or what a centralized, AI type system would do, but do it across the entire network at the nodes. There's no central recommender, right? And that's really what I've been focused on for a little while. There are some very cool companies that are doing some very cool things. There's one company I'm familiar with that is doing transcoding as a proxy for mining. So you have video and you want to put it out there, and it needs to be in all these different video codec formats, and with various compression and different bit rates and things like that. And there's a solution out there that actually does like the act of actually encoding, doing the computation to analyze the video, to actually produce the output. Um, it's a very clever computational mechanism, right? And things like that are really very close to a mining activity. They're really a proxy for mining. So if you end up producing the different formats and transcoding the videos, you'll end up getting a reward for the amount of work.
Sure.
One of the early issues with blockchain and data is that data can be faked, data can be spoofed, you can, falsify all this stuff. But if you have an actual output, you can verify it,
Right.
right? So, do I think that it's going to happen anytime soon? No, I think it's going to probably take quite a bit of time to actually manifest, but I think it's inevitably where things are going to go. I don't really believe that the web is going to exist in its current construction for very long. I think most people will end up probably running their own recommender engine locally on their computer. I think apps are going to become very commoditized, and you'll have, a box in your house where you can do all the heavy computation required for recommendations, and you'll share some sort of data with, anonymously with this decentralized network. It'll use that data to analyze it and generate recommendations, and all that kind of stuff will end up happening inside your own machine in kind of like a lockbox kind of way where you have full control over your privacy.
And AI will not be able to break into the encryption in that box, or that's going to be a problem we're going to have to attack.
Well, so I mean, it's a question of technology, right? So, is technology good or is it technology bad? Well, it can be
Yeah,
used
it
for
depends on
both, right?
who's.
It
Yeah,
really depends on
that's
who's
right. That's
directing
right.
it or who's in control of it. So whoever's in control, it's similar with AI. Whoever's in control of it, and this is why we talk about centralized AI and the global domination mindset of large mega corporations and things like that. It was cool for a while, but I think there's a sea change happening, and people are realizing that this is not very cool. It can be very oppressive. It can be very controlling, and it can end up producing dystopian hell. Right. So, if it's permitted to go on for long enough. So I think, we have all of these massive data sets that are out there, but we don't have one or many that are public and on a blockchain and totally transparent and working with a network model where it's decentrally uh, computing things and not having to go to the centralized entity to get the recommendation and get the results.
Warner, I want to bring you in on this. This is so fascinating. Do you have any questions for Steve?
I have about 30 or 40 different questions going off in about 100 different spider
Start.
web-like network effects. But I guess the question I would ask is, Steve, what do you think is the business opportunity for individuals in the future? Like because I've done a lot of programming myself, so I understand how to build out databases and programs, and I see the power of the blockchain. What do you see for the future? What are some business opportunities that have high margins, not like a low margin business like a grocery store chain or an oil business? What are some high margin businesses that you see coming out of this sort of AI blockchain revolution?
Oh man, that's a loaded one. There's tremendous amounts of business that can come out of this. I mean, think about how aggregated all of the, for example, the advertising dollars and the e-commerce dollars that basically subsidize the internet, the web, right? You're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. I think it's close to hundreds of billions, you know, pushing up on maybe a trillion or so. But yeah, I mean, there's massive amounts of business opportunity there. Uh, what where the companies are centrally providing these uh, recommendation services, basically, is what they are. They recommend their systems and recommendation engines. The reason that you see what you see on the web, um, you know, there will be probably better forms of search. There will be probably better forms of e-commerce and recommendations. There probably will be, uh, whole initiatives to uh, create rewards mechanisms around them. So, a lot of people look at Bitcoin and blockchain and Ethereum and some of those technologies as empowering financial markets. They do, and that's fine. But they also have the ability to generate rewards. So for anyone that wants to do work, you think about like Uber and Uber drivers and the services apps that are out there. If you could participate in like a mining operation, like a Bitcoin mining operation, or any kind of, the transcoding one that I talked about, if you can participate in helping a public AI type data set become more intelligent, then you should be rewarded for it. And I can imagine a whole different type of all sorts of different businesses around the rewards concept, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, you get rewarded for doing some sort of work that's useful to the network. And yeah, I mean, I think there's far too many potential businesses to describe, but some of them will likely replace the big ones that exist now. Advertising, services like that, anything that provides recommendations like search, um, product recommendations, things like that. And then, news is a big one, publishing, right? So people, where do they get the news? And can I have my own decentralized AI know what I want to hear and go get it and fetch it and bring it to me automatically? Yes, you can. Um, yeah, I mean, there's whoever's going to be responsible for starting up this kind of decentralized AI, because there's really nothing that is out there that exists at this point, will have a stranglehold on the entire rewards mechanism. So whoever whoever starts that one is going to potentially put up a very good fight against some of these larger entities. Of course, it will be a fight because they're not going to go so easily. But at least this is America, right? So we can compete and we can eat into their share and we can outperform them over time. And that's just how capitalism works, right? So I think over time you'll start seeing very clever technologies that learn how to process speech, how to process video, how to process images. Are really just, well, video is just really a series of images, right? So you can see objects in different videos, and you'll end up, and text within different pages, and you'll end up getting a better type of, or really like short circuiting uh, search, right? You'll end up being able to provide a much better search based off analyzing all this content. And if the entire world was participating in it, the data set would get pretty big pretty quickly. And, you just have to be able to keep the network running and processing as fast as possible.
So this would be an open source solution or open source competition to Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Samsung, etc. It would be primarily coded through open source software, And then the monetary system would be some sort of rewards to transition people. Instead of typing your search into Google, come here and we're going to pay you this token to do work. Even just a simple search, that's feeding the algorithm. Is that kind of how you see it, Steve?
Yeah, I think, it'll be a box in your home and it will be connected to the internet, but it's mostly pulling. It's not really sending much data to the internet. It's not client server in that way. It's more, there's a distributed network of nodes that have computational processing capability, and you do push information to those nodes, and collectively they analyze it and return some sort of result. The speed is really an issue in the beginning. It might take quite a while, but like everything else, that'll improve, right? All technology improves over time. And yeah, I mean, I can envision a future web that is entirely decentralized, and the only thing maybe you have to do is log in somewhere from some sort of provider that is more of like a curator or an aggregator or something, or a model analyzer that can receive information and then determine lookalikeness and push that back out to the edge, to the nodes.
That's, I mean, that's extremely fascinating because you talked about the client server, and right now, just for example, like social media, there's one site for business, LinkedIn. There's one site for really videos, YouTube. Maybe Vimeo's more the artistic, creative side. But you're right in terms of like these sites, these servers, these centralized servers don't mimic human behavior. Like for example, Yelp. I can't tell you how many times I've been on Yelp and I don't know the palate of the individual that's recommending me the food. So I don't use Yelp anymore because it sent me on these wild goose chases to places that I don't even think the dishes that individuals recommended were even half that good. And the reason why that's important is what you're saying is each person's got this unique sort of set of flavor profiles or a certain way they want to spend their money, a certain design set for fashion, and
Mm-hmm.
having this hugely distributed network instead of just going to one server, it like goes out across a network and it's like, oh, this AI really knows that. And I like that AI. Oh, this AI is talking to that AI and that knows that. And you really get this. That's extremely fascinating. I can see all
Yeah,
the
you'll tune it. You'll end up tuning it. It'll learn from you. It'll learn from your family. It'll learn from your friends or whoever you let it, learn from, right? But you'll be in control of it. It's not all under the hood of some global, mega corporation that they don't know you and you're the
That's
product,
right.
right? And they're monetizing you and your data instead of them monetizing all you and your data and everything you do on the web. You'll receive the reward for sharing that data.
Yeah, and that's fat. And Mari and I were talking about this in our last podcast, the NFT, where I think it's a complete bubble right now, but the technology in the future where if we're have this box in our home and I'm creating content, now I can mark that content as mine. If someone goes out and uses it, then I can get paid for it wherever it is in the world. I think that's also a huge. So not only getting a reward for providing, I mean, maybe data, but also providing like really like high quality content.
Yeah, NFTs are interesting, I think. It's one interesting aspect of what you can do with blockchain technology. I think there's potentially much more interesting things than its current application, like when you start chopping them up. Uh, but the reward stuff, I mean, you would basically be providing data and computational power into the system, right? So you're running a node and you're actually helping to compute the recommendations for yourself and for others. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty far out there, honestly. There's not too many people I've spoken with that are, thinking along those lines. Although there are some people out there that I've heard leak some of their thoughts around it. The folks at, well, I don't know if I should mention exactly who, but there are some folks out there that are working on some very interesting things with zero knowledge proofs and snarks and really, quite interesting technologies.
Zero
They're doing research. at this point.
Zero knowledge proof, meaning it could speed up the processing of the blockchain instead of taking so long, it could do it a little faster.
Well, it can prove something without knowing about the contents of what it's proving. That's basically what a zero knowledge proof is. Um,
Wow.
there's mechanisms for it. I mean, blockchain is really a game changer. The technology there, people say it's just a decent, it's another database technology. Please, I mean, it's definitely not just another database technology. Yes, it does have storage capabilities, but the consensus mechanism on it and the decentralized way of agreeing that the data in the block is all, legit is it's unbelievable. I mean, it's really very impressive. It's one of the greatest advancements in human technology uh, in recent times, definitely. Potentially longer, right?
Let's step into topic number 2, gentlemen. So if this happens some way that we get into this decentralized AI and we're getting, or there is some sort of reward for work, and you have an account with this decentralized AI, and you say something that's offensive, how do you protect yourself from being blocked from your own work or the rewards from your work? Can you kind of unpack that for us, Steve?
Yeah, I mean the way I would envision it is everything you do. It's like what you have now with like Alexa and Siri and those things, except it's not sending your data anywhere. It's all of the computation that has to happen to process it is distributed out to the edge into every node. So you're running a node and it can handle whatever you're saying or whatever you're doing. So it's all completely private. And you can open up holes and share anonymously certain types of data that would help the network, become more intelligent. Um, but really, it's very private. It's a privacy technology, really. Uh, the data gets stored immutably. I mean, even in the context of, I mean, I think there's huge applications in government for it. If everyone was running a blockchain, right, and everything you do on your computer is totally logged and tracked and immutable, meaning it can't be changed, can't be falsified or anything. No one could be set up, no one could be framed or anything, that kind of stuff. So there are, applications for it within secure, types of environments. But bring me back to your question. I don't know that I answered the question.
No, I think you're driving at it. So right now, our monetary system is controlled by a centralized bank. It's a private bank. It's owned by its members banks all across America, and it's somehow a little bit tied to our government. At least it says the United States of America on the notes they issue. If we transition into decentralized AI and we're doing work for this AI and getting some sort of monetary reward, how does that look? How do we interact with that? Is it our money, or is it our work and our reward, and we can do with it what we please, or does it stay in this system? Or just kind of how I'm basically describing what 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, what does our monetary system look like if AI goes this direction?
Well, it's faster, definitely. It's more transparent, definitely. The systems that would be out there would put a lot of data on them in a very transparent way. Anyone could access them through APIs and things like that. You'll probably see things that are very, very similar to how it happens now, honestly. There's a stranglehold in terms of like DeFi or decentralized finance with digital currencies, which are exactly that. They're just digital versions of currencies. They're not necessarily rewards type
Sure.
currencies. They're just, an electronic version of the same thing. So, you have the money powers that create uh, paper, notes out of thin air, and um, supposedly do what's best for whatever you know balance they bring. But I think over time you're going to see things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as opposed to digital currencies where they attempt to sort of equalize uh, the printing, right? So a couple of years ago,
Sure.
Bitcoin cost, couple $100, couple $1,000 to buy. Today, Bitcoin costs $34,000 to buy, right? At one point, it was in the 60s, right? And I mean, is it a factor of
Yep.
printing $11 trillion in a year? It might be. I don't think anyone really has the answer to that. But, does it cost more to buy one Bitcoin because the value of the dollar or whatever currency you're using, fiat, to purchase it is devalued? I mean, that might be what happens is over time, Bitcoin is like the equalizer that kind of levels out all of the currencies against one another, and it kind of acts like a baseline, right?
A check on power.
Similar, people call Bitcoin digital gold. Yeah, I mean, if you look back to why people used gold and silver in antiquity, they have a natural antibacterial properties, right? You had silverware,
Yep.
but I can bet you that the gold,
Yep.
the kings were using goldware, not silverware, right? Because
Yep.
gold also has
Yep.
that property. Metals have that property, right? So, gold was pretty scarce. Bitcoin's definitely scarce. Ethereum is more like silver. It was more plentiful. It wasn't quite as scarce. It was for everybody to use, and Ethereum is basically going to generate unlimited amounts of blocks over time. And you had talked in a previous podcast I would listen to about utility and things like that.
A scarcity, yeah, utility specifically, valuing something based on utility versus scarcity.
Yeah, I see Bitcoin kind of like the gold and
Okay.
Ethereum kind of like the silver. More people are going to use it. There's much more application with Ethereum. You can build smart contracts on top of it. Yeah, you might get Bitcoin to do those things with some of the new protocols and adaptations to the protocol that they're adding. But yeah, I mean, I think you'll see similar things back to the financial question. You'll see similar dark pools, big block
Sure.
trades in Bitcoin, moving big blocks of Bitcoin around because it's just totally unfeasible to work with Bitcoin at some point in the future. It's too costly, and it's really reserved for not, OTC, but off the
Right.
books kind of block moves, right? So I think you'll see, and there's plenty of technologies out there that are working on dark pools and Bitcoin and other currencies, and blockchain, right? But
Yeah, just so our listeners can understand what a dark pool is, I'll take a crack at it. It is a exchange that is not public where two parties can interact and they don't know who each other are. Is that correct, or can you unpack that for us?
well, they're off the ledger transactions, right? It's a separate
Okay.
ledger that happens between usually large entities, right? They need to create liquidity, and they transfer things around and allow to free up liquidity for the markets. And I mean, there's many applications for it, but that's the major one, is just providing liquidity to markets. Um,
Right.
so these things happen currently with
Yep.
regular the today's financial system, and there are decentralized dark pools that are out there where these things will continue to happen in the future.
Right. Just an example for folks that are listening is if you had a huge block of publicly traded stock, and it would take you a long time to move that because you could only sell it you'd sell little fractions of it every day, but you wanted to make a big move, you could go into a dark pool and you could find somebody who'd say, "I'll take the whole thing. Hey, Steve, load me up. I'll take here. We'll do a deal, and I'll instead of buying it one share at a time." So, I think that's one way of looking at what a dark pool does or facilitates for two parties.
Yeah, they do atomic swaps, and sometimes they don't necessarily trade. They trade one thing for another. There's all sorts of different types of trades that occur on dark pools, but it's basically hidden from the public until some point in the future. And that kind of stuff will continue to happen. So I don't really see too much disruption to the whole financial system, other than a lot of things are going to go digital, which in my opinion is not necessarily the greatest thing, because if you have centralized controllers who go bad, right, for lack of a better word, they become evil or whatever, and they want to shut you off because they don't like what you're saying, or whatever it is. bye-bye, right? You're done. Your bank
Right.
account's disconnected. You have no access to anything, and you can't transact in commerce. So
You're in
it's
purgatory.
yeah, you're screwed entirely, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, but back to the part about Bitcoin being like an equalizer. I think it'll attempt to level everything out so that everything has a more fair value against each other, right? So all the different types of currencies that come into existence, and they're going to make you know ridiculous ones. There's going to be quadrillions in digital currency, just like there is today in derivatives, right? So all of these things are either attempts, and stable coins and things like that are all either attempts at centralizing control over a system by pumping as much stuff as you can into it, getting it used, utility right there, right? Getting it in circulation and getting people to want to hold it or have it, and then having a stranglehold on it, which is, the opposite of what we want to have happen. Or Bitcoin's going to come along and balance everything out, which I think is the more likely scenario. They talk about the flippening, and when is Ethereum going to become larger market than Bitcoin? In my opinion, I don't. Yeah, like maybe it might have a larger market cap at some point, but I don't really think so. I don't. I tend to think that a lot of normal transactions will happen in the other chains, and Bitcoin will be reserved for bank to bank or big block, institution to institution type trading.
That's a fascinating conversation in terms of Bitcoin. So you don't think it'll be a store of value for small time investors like us? Because obviously it's fluctuating. It was at 60,000, 30, and now it's. But that's interesting. Basically, Bitcoin becomes a money market.
Well, I mean, I do think it does store value as long as there's confidence in the system, and if you have big institutional type entities holding massive quantities of it, uh, and transacting with it to provide liquidity and things like that, then yeah, it'll be a really good store of value in my opinion. And I'm not giving any financial advice. I'm not a financial person. Just
Yeah.
disclaimer here. I'm not
Yeah.
telling any. I don't even look at Bitcoin as an
Say it
investment
again.
product, right? It is
Yes.
not,
Say it
in my
again.
opinion, right? So
Yeah.
consult with whoever
Neither do
and
we,
get
gentlemen.
good
Neither do we.
advice from a financial person. Definitely not me. I think too far out into the future
Yes.
to give any reasonable advice to
Yes.
anybody nowadays, right?
Yes.
There's so much. We could do a whole podcast on that statement alone.
Yeah, man. So
So Mario, go ahead.
All right. So I just want to one more question on this second topic is how do we position ourselves? How do we make a move here to not get sucked into a system where we can't get back out of it? So if we go down a road, Steve, my question is, if we down a road, is there going to be off ramps for us to go, no, we're on the wrong monetary system, let's jump to this one? Or if you pick a road that you get on and you're starting to go down like basically a one-way road where you're on a turnpike, there are no exit ramps, there are no turnaround points, you picked one, you got on board with one of them, and you're going down this road, and it'll be all right, but you're not going to be able to switch. Do you see that, or is there going to be off ramps if we pick the wrong currency?
I mean, barring global catastrophe and the lights going out, all electricity stopping, which would only happen for a short period of time if it ended up happening, right? We're pretty resourceful.
Or a localized,
We're
yeah,
we're,
EMP
we're a
strike?
pretty resourceful 8 billion people,
Sure.
right? No matter
Sure.
what any centralized group tries to do, unless they really put destruction out there, and even if they do, uh, we'll be able to get energy and turn these machines back on and be able to connect to these networks, and there will be some way of transacting with these things. Now, like every time you convert from crypto into fiat or want to pull it into your bank, there's KYC AML, and it's really not anonymous in any way. Crypto, it's actually
Right.
a very transparent, very traceable system to use.
Right.
Um, but will you be able to convert? I mean, there's interop with everything. There's interoperability, and you can exchange anything for anything. There's swaps that happen on all these different types of swapping platforms. You can go in and out just like, assuming the world exists in a very civilized, normal way. You should be able to get in and out of anything almost instantly, really just the speed of the network transaction. Um, you know, that being said, I would not recommend that anybody put all of their,
Right.
all of their, uh, hopes into one system or another. It's always good to have physical metals. It's always good to have property, land, things like that. Um, so you have to diversify, but there's definitely something to be said of uh, this disruption that blockchain and cryptocurrencies are bringing to the world. You have countries that are now declaring it as their currency. You have El
That's right.
Salvador, and you're going to see others. That's interesting stuff to me. I don't really know what's going to happen there. I haven't really spent the time thinking it totally through, but they're interesting moves. Um, but as far as getting in and out, as long as there's electricity and people have computers and there's normal civilization going on, you should be able to get in and out of anything relatively quickly. Yeah, if there's a crash happening, you might, you know, get hit pretty bad if you don't have speed to be able to execute these transactions. But for the most part, assuming a relatively stable, normal world, uh, it's business as usual. You should be able to get in and out, if not faster than other uh, non-blockchain, non-cryptocurrency based alternatives.
You brought up land, the word land in El Salvador. Would you mind or would you object sharing? I guess this rolls into topic number 3. Would you object sharing how you maximize personal freedom in an unfree world with Central America options?
Sure. I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica. I've moved there twice. I'm currently there. Well, right now I'm in New York, but I'll be back there later in the week. And there's land opportunities everywhere. I mean, you know, you can hold land, you can take land and put a fence around it and hold it. Property seems to retain its value pretty well over time, so it's a good store value. Um, there are locations in the United States even that are very affordable, and there's desirable places and there's undesirable places, and it's all really just what are you able to do? Can you do you have the ability to buy land? A lot of people don't have the ability to get liquid and put up 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, to put a down payment on a small property, or uh, really get into land. But there will be probably
Right.
opportunities for people to get into those things at a much cheaper rate in other locations that are not inside the US, but in you know Central America, South America, some interesting places. If you speak Spanish, it's a good place to look at.
Are you happy? Are you happy with the government of Costa Rica as far as how they treat you?
Yeah, I mean, I really have no interaction with them at all, except when I go through the airport. uh,
Right.
but they don't have income tax.
Right.
I mean, I pay my taxes in the United States. I'm a U.S. citizen, right? But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I really just ended up there because both my brothers moved there, and my cousin moved there, and at the time that I ended up moving there, everything just worked out that I could go be a little adventurous and spend some time down there. But more towards the whole privacy, right? How do you have privacy and personal freedom and things like that? It really comes down to you know privacy in your papers, privacy in your data, privacy, which is the same thing,
Right.
right? And I think we'll probably end up seeing some shift of some portion of the population who are very concerned about their privacy. They're either not agreeing with the mainstream narratives, and they are being shadow banned and blacklisted and all that from social media and all that kind of stuff, and they're basically becoming dissidents. I mean, you have the Secretary of Defense talking about you know uh, dissidents and insurrectionists and things like that. I don't want to get all into that, but you know, there are situations where people end up becoming persecuted, right, by their
That's
government.
right.
I mean, it's historically, it happens with every government, honestly, everyone, throughout history.
That's right.
So, how do you keep your freedom in those situations? I mean, you go low tech, right? You don't
Yep.
necessarily
Yep.
have to carry a phone around that has all these apps and all this stuff on it. You can carry one that's, a little bit more low tech. Uh, it starts in the local community. You got to get to know your neighbors, right? It's your neighborhood,
That's
really.
right.
You got to start leading. You got to start meeting your neighbors and finding out where all the good spots are and who the good people are, and becoming uh, associated with them, and getting them, finding like-minded people, right?
Yeah, being an asset to your neighbors, not only
Exactly. And they have something that you need, and that's just the way it works, right? Spend with the good guys, find out who the good guys are. Spend locally. Don't shop at the mega, markets and all those places. Shop with people that you come to know that are like-minded and are good. And I think you'll start seeing more of these neighborhood type networks forming over time. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting times we live in, and if history repeats itself, it's also quite dangerous, right? So you have to just be aware, and know your neighbors, and really be good for your local neighborhood.
How do you maximize your personal freedom when it comes to money in an unfree world? So a lot of times now we've been talking about survival, food, water, shelter, alignment, communication. How do you deal with money in an unfree world?
Well, I mean, it depends on the severity, right? It's always good to have cash, U.S. dollars probably on hand. It's good to have some silver, some gold, some metals, right? And it's good to have skills, like Warner was saying, that are valuable, because I mean, there's other things. You have ammo and that kind of stuff as well, but those, that definitely becomes valuable in like a Mad Max type of scenario. But hopefully the world doesn't go that way. Um, but yeah, having skills that are useful, being a mechanic, knowing how to fix a car, knowing how to work with technology, knowing how to farm, produce food, things like that. Those are all very useful survival type skills. And then offering it up to the community, and then it just becomes more of like a bartering type of situation at that point, if you're in that scenario, right?
Yeah, so there's this fine line where you're operating in the monetary system and then things go awry and then you're operating in a bartering system and we're not quite sure if we're going to go to that bartering system or in the monetary system. So what we're discussing right now for listeners is this: we're kind of talking about dabbling in both systems. So you're prepared to operate, if it's in the monetary system, you have cash stack to buy phenomenal businesses. If it's not in that system and you're in the bartering system, then you have skill sets. So it's either cash or skill sets, is what I'm sort of hearing.
Yeah, I mean, and ideally the skill sets are around things people need, like food and um, you know transportation, and mobility and things like that. Um, but that's not to say someone that's an accountant that couldn't be extremely useful. I mean, everyone would end up having something to offer. Just you have to find what that person could be utilized for, right? I mean, hopefully the world stays very cool, and I mean, there's a lot more of us than the bad people, right? There's way more of us. So, and
Yeah,
most
there
people
is.
are very cool, and like each other, and just want awesome, and they don't think about half of the stuff that these some of the evil minded people do. So hopefully everyone has a little bit of faith in humanity. And I mean, I'm very pro human. I don't agree, if you want to go back into technology and transhumanism and all that kind of stuff, I don't agree that humans are going to be able to upload successfully their consciousness into, basically transformers, right? And become, synthetic, uh, immortal beings. They're not. That is a trap. It's a prison, right? Something about humans. I mean, the most important thing is our mortality. Something definitely happens after, and it's probably going to be pretty kick-ass. You know, while we're here, we have to live as good a life as we can, and hopefully leave a mark on the world, a good one, and do our best. But later on, once we go to the next level, there's probably a whole lot more that awaits us, and it's going to be unbelievable.
Talking about this phenomenal life here now, why did you choose Costa Rica? I mean, I've been down there. I know the whole eco tourism down there. It's just a phenomenal place.
Well, so I'm from New York. I love New York. I like that it's my home. And about 15 years ago, or actually longer, about 20 years ago, my older brother moved there, and I had started visiting, and I visited like, I don't know, 12 different times before I ended up moving there, right? So I just kind of fell in love with the people and the country, and everyone's just much more relaxed. I don't really belong in New York, in the rat race and commuting into Manhattan and doing all that stuff. It's not my thing anymore. I've gotten a little older, and I'm much more aware of who I am and what I like. And it's expensive here and all that kind of stuff. So the quality of life choices of just moving out of New York to anywhere were pretty obvious that you can have a better quality of life unless you're a millionaire in in a place that's not New York City, right? So uh, because my brother had moved there, I just decided to go down there, and my younger brother moved there, and we're close, so we all got to stay together and just build a life down there. Um, I don't regret it at all. I think it's awesome. The people are very friendly, very cool. Um, yeah, I was down there for about 10 years in a row, and then I came back. I went to, before COVID, I went to a boot camp in Miami and learned how to do JavaScript programming. And I've been designing software products for like 20 years, and yeah, I was like a dangerous level architect and all that, but I wasn't a hands-on programmer, and I kind of wanted to know, what am I telling these guys to do all day long, right? Like, what am I having to build, and how are they actually doing it? And that experience was great. Then I moved back to New York for about a year and a half, 2 years, and I ended up finding an opportunity in Costa Rica to go do some work down there. So I'm back. I'm back in Costa Rica.
That's awesome. I mean, Costa Rica. I know exactly why you made that decision. It's
Yeah.
it's basically a lot of people, I think, find themselves in these situations right now where they can barely make it by. They're in all this debt, and what they start finding out is, unless you're like 10, 20, 30 worth, 30 million, you're not you're
Right.
not you're literally just, you're a slave. So it's like, why am I going to live here when I can go down to Costa Rica and live like a king?
Yeah, I mean, you're just scraping by. So that's. I mean, if I could give advice to somebody, I would say don't live in a very expensive place. Find another place to live. It's not always the easiest thing to accomplish, but if you find yourself surrounded by, uh, you know, people that are struggling, and you're struggling, then it might be time to look south, right? uh, Especially if you're in the north, right? But it might be time to go south, right? And find some place that's more affordable, and people are more laid back, and there's plenty of cities all over the place. A lot of the jobs are you know aggregated into the cities, but nowadays with remote workers and everything, it's becoming a new world. I mean, people can basically work from anywhere, and a lot of people, not everybody obviously, but many people who were located in and around the city areas now have more options. And yeah, I would advise people to find affordable lifestyles.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because, as you've heard some of our podcasts in the past, we talk about setting yourself up financially. And what people don't realize is if you're getting your cash siphoned off of you every month from rent, from expenses, from food, whatever else, we know because my wife and I used to live in California and we actually moved out to Wyoming because we own some real estate out here. And we're selling our last fourplex in California because we see the way it's going. It's beautiful, phenomenal state. Yet the people that run it, they don't want to partner with local business people like say Costa Rica or Wyoming or North Carolina, South Carolina, the Southeast does, and that's people don't realize that you'll never get ahead if you don't align yourself with like-minded people in your community and a government that supports you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're never getting ahead. You're always just a little bit behind and you're always playing catch up. If no matter how much, I mean, that's not true. Sometimes you can make an extraordinary amount of money depending on what your job is, what your income is. But,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're a regular person and you're making a normal kind of wage, right, then it's going to be difficult in these very expensive locations. And I think, we're going to see a lot of people moving out of the cities. I mean, already in New York, there were tons of people that just moved out of the cities and the surrounding areas. But cities are cool. I mean, they're okay. They served a purpose for a long time, and they'll probably continue to serve some sort of purpose. But the world is now very distributed. People can work wherever they
yeah,
want.
it is. Yeah, well, thank you, Steve. I know your time is valuable. Any closing thoughts for our
No,
audience?
I just wanted to thank you guys for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. I think what you're doing, and I really enjoy your podcasts. I've
Oh,
listened
thank
to
you.
quite
That
a few
means
of
a
them
lot.
so far, and I probably will end up listening to all of them. I consume extraordinary amounts of information, so I'll probably be your number one subscriber. Yeah, no, I think you guys are doing great things for uh, for others, right? It's very cool of you people to give advice and bring interesting people into the program and share their thoughts and you know uh, really help others. It's a great thing you guys are doing.
Thank you for listening to the Red to Black podcast. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to our podcast. If you would like to connect with us in the future, you can find us on LinkedIn. Simply search for Werner Minchel or Mario Parzino. Also, you can find a link to our LinkedIn profiles in the profile section of the podcast. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.